Welcome, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. There's nobody else pulling into the driveway, and for the most part, I expected you all to be here right on time, and you all have done wonderful, so thank you. Welcome tonight. We have a very special guest, Tal Schnieder. I'm going to read a little bit of her biography here for you all, just so that you know who she is. She's the chief diplomatic and political correspondent for the Israeli financial daily Globes. She's the paper's senior political writer, lead columnist, and analyst with over 160,000 followers. Serves as the paper's point person for digital and social media platforms, covers the Israeli political scene, Israeli foreign policy, the U.S.-Israel relationship, Middle East diplomacy, and the Jewish world in her daily beat. Pretty much everything, right? She has a number of really wonderful awards. She's a very well-respected journalist, and it's a great honor to have her here. She's been touring the Iowa area for the last weekend or so. Unfortunately, our caucus was not the best-run thing this year for you to see, it seems like. I hope it was very interesting. She's been giving talks at a number of different places here in Iowa and also in Nebraska. She speaks about Israel society at a crossroads, four principal sectors, including the national religious, the secular Arabs, and ultra-Orthodox. Talks a little bit about cousins at heart, the American Judaism and Israeli Judaism and the connection between the two populations, which is what we promoted as her talk tonight for sure. Gender politics in Israel, and she even talks a little bit about the unique relationship between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu and how that affects our relationship. I'm going to let her talk about whatever she wants to talk about tonight for us and what she finds most interesting, but please welcome Tal Schnieder here to Temple Judah. When we go upstairs, she brought us some chalva, so we'll put it out, and you'll all be able to enjoy some Israeli chalva as well.
Yes.
Let's make sure that connects up when you're ready.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's so what needs to be done here?
Well, let's wait
a few minutes.
And let's see if it will sign back
Okay.
into the app. That would
So. Great. Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. Great. All right. So, hi everybody. As said, I'm Tal Schnieder. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and I'm having a great fun here in Iowa, even though it felt last night as if I'm in Israel with those problems with the result. This is something that we experience in Israeli politics. It's very unlike the American to do it. So, before I'll begin, I have a question for you. How do you know that Israeli politicians were already, before the earth was created? Before the earth was created, we already had Israeli politicians. How do you know that? Nobody knows. I'll tell you why. Ki haaretz hayta tohu vavohu. Do you know this sentence? Because the land was chaotic, like they say. So this is the reason we know we had Israeli politician back then. But, I think you can say that of all of the politicians. It's not just the Israeli. So, my talk today is going to be Israel Society at Crossroad. Let's see. Just a bit about myself. As said, I'm the political reporter of Israel's business newspaper. Globes is an evening newspaper. It's still being served at 7 p.m. to the people's houses for dinner. They still have a print edition, even though these days, it's mostly online. The paper is the oldest business newspaper in Israel. It has a pink sheet, actually, a really nice, it sort of looks like the Financial Times. Before I was at Globes, I was DC correspondent for Israeli newspaper Ma'ariv. I was there in Washington, D.C. between 2004 and 2009. So I covered the Bush years, and then I covered the 2008 campaign following. So I was here in Iowa in 2008, and I was doing back then the Iowa, New Hampshire, and then it was easier because I lived in the United States. So I've gone to Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, all of those areas. And I went back to Israel at the end of 2009 after I participated. I mean, I went to report on the Obama inauguration. I was at the White House. Then we moved back to Israel at the end of 2009. And since 2009, I kept, going back and forth. For 2016, I actually traveled to the United States. Here you see me in the White House. This is last year because I'm a diplomatic correspondent, so I traveled with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, on the plane. Not all of the time because he travels a lot. He travels almost every other week. So we can't, as papers today, we can't do, he travels so much. We can't do it on a regular basis. Actually, last week, he was in the White House on Tuesday, Monday and Tuesday, but I was already set to have my flight on Wednesday, so I did not join them. So this is from either 2018 or 19, I'm not sure. After the years in Ma'ariv, I had an independent political blog for a couple of years because Ma'ariv went under Chapter 11. Ma'ariv is one of Israel's oldest newspaper. It was founded in 1948, but it went into Chapter 11 during the last decade, and it's now back on its feet. But I moved on. I had a political blog. So through the political blog, through being an independent reporter, I traveled in 2016 back and forth to the United States, again doing Iowa, New Hampshire. I actually, first stop in 2016 was Cedar Rapids on January 30. I will not forget that day because that was the first time that I entered a Trump event in Cedar Rapids. I saw him here. And from that point, I traveled back to Des Moines, and I saw the rest of the candidates. Obviously, it was two sides, so I saw Cruz and Rubio and all of them, and also Clinton and Sanders. So this is me a bit. This is on the on the airplane. Where am I? That's me. And I think we were traveling to Europe. This is in the. It's the GOP convention, and this is with Nancy Pelosi when she came to visit Israel not 2 weeks ago, but in 2019. And this is the American ambassador to Israel. And I go to this is me with the Prime Minister walking on the hallways. I go to the Israeli Knesset every Monday. Right now, as we speak, we do not go every Monday because we don't have, I don't know if you were following, but we don't have a really functioning Knesset and a functioning Israeli government. So the Knesset is the Israeli parliament, is kind of off. It's on recess, but the recess it's a repeating recess. We've been in recess since April. So not much. I'm sorry?
I said yikes.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. But usually that's what we do. We go to the Israeli committees. I work there every Monday. And so I'm going to focus today on President Rivlin presentation. Reuven Rivlin, I don't know if all of you heard the name. I'm sure you know pretty much, yes. He's Israel's 10th president. Before him, we had Shimon Peres, who was very, a global figure, very well known. Rivlin replaced him in 2014. Now, Israel president doesn't have executive power. It is a ceremonial job. He has two major missions. One is giving pardons to criminals when he gets the pardon request, pardoning criminals. This is also a ceremonial job because he doesn't make the decision. He doesn't have much of a discretion. He just really listens to the Justice Department. And his other job is to be the person who stands right after an election and grant the Israeli mandate to form a government. So Israel's electoral system is very different from the American. We are based on the British system, which means we have a government and a government with a shared responsibility. And in order to form a government, you need to have a coalition agreement. So you need to have several parties agreeing to work together. And by agreeing, I mean they have to reach a common, paper. actually an agreement, which is written like an agreement, like a legal agreement, which says we are agreeing to do A, B, C, D, and on. And in order to reach that point, they have to conduct negotiation. So when we say that we have elections in Israel, on election night, even when we have the results, and the results in Israel do take 24 hours and even a week, but when we have, a starting, an understanding of the results the following day, a day after the election, this doesn't mean that we have a winner, and it doesn't mean that we have a government. And this is a common mistake, because I saw Trump saying about Netanyahu, how come he's not the prime minister? He won the election on election night. Well, the answer is that no, he did not win the election on election night, because on election night you do get the numbers, but from that point to the agreement, you need to negotiate the agreement, and this may take about 8 to 10 weeks, during which no one is the prime minister except the outgoing prime minister. So Rivlin, as the president, who is the one that has the discretion to decide following a day after the election who will be granted with the opportunity to form the government, which means who is the person that can start the negotiation. It sounds as a simple job, but it is not. It used to be a simple job until 2019. So all of Israel's history, every time we had an election, there was someone who were granted with the opportunity to form a government, and he either managed to do it or didn't manage to do it, but we had a clear, situation. But during 2019, for the first time, we are in a major constitutional crisis where no one is able to form a government, and I will go to that later on. But before I want to do it, I want to talk to you about Rivlin's four-tribe vision, which is important to understand why we are in such a political chaos. So Rivlin gave quite a significant lecture at the beginning of his presidency. It was granted at Herzliya. There's a place like that. It's a city. At Herzliya Conference, it's called. It's a major event. And what he said that the Israel society is going a far-reaching transformation with significant demographic changes. And because of those changes, there is a new Israeli order. And how can you look at it? You can look at this by looking at Israel's first graders, the demographic of the kids. Now, let me tell you just a couple of numbers. I will not go too deep into that, but you do know Israel by now has 9 million people, which is kind of big. I think Iowa has 3 million, right? Maryland, where I lived for many years, has 3 million. Austria in Europe has 9 million. So, we became kind of big. We are not this little community where everybody knows everybody anymore. And we do have an amazing birth rate. So if you look at Israel demographics, and we are a Western democracy, we are considered a Western democracy. So our birth rate is 3.16. It is 3.11 for Jewish families and 3.37 for Muslims families. So the difference is not huge. It's not huge. The Muslim has a bit of a higher rate, but overall Israel has an amazing trend of birth rate. Just on comparison to, if you look at the U.S., the U.S. has 1.8 birth rate, UK 1.8, France 1.9, Germany 1.4. So you can see that we are situated in a very good place, which means the society is growing and thriving. And what they're looking at, demographics experts, they're looking at 10 years ahead or 20 years ahead, or, some of them look into 2050. And what they do is they take the first graders, the compromise of the first graders, in order to envision what's going to be the population changes. So we used to think as Israel, if you all know Israel, when you think about it, we used to think about it as having a big major secular, liberal, Zionist majority, And then, those little minorities of Muslims, a minority of ultra-Orthodox, and minority of religious Zionists. So, but when you look at the trends of the demographics for the kids, you see a different, something different to expect. The secular group, which used to be the ruling, majority of Israel, is dwindling down. I'm part of the secular, liberal secular Zionist group, of course. So this group used to be, if you look at the demographics of the first graders in the year of 2000, they had 45%. Now, in 20 years later, they have 38%. The Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox, they used to have in the year 2000 14%, and now they have almost 20%. The national religious, they went up a little bit from 14 to 15, and the Muslims also went up a bit. Another way to look at it, and this is, different researchers, so don't hold me for the numbers because it's coming from different, institutions. This is not about the kids, not about the first graders. This is about the whole society. They gave projection for 2030. So right now, ultra-Orthodox has 12%, adults and kids. When you look in 2030, it's becoming 18%. Arabs, Muslims, right? Arabs, there are now 21% of Israel's society, which means every fifth person in Israel is an Arab. So they're now 21%. When I say Arabs, I mean Muslims, because from the 21%, it's 19 Muslims, and then 1 to 2% of Druze, Bedouins, and Christians. So, but overall, it's Muslims. So they're now 21%, and in the year of 2030, they're going to become 24%. National religious. This is the people with kippah sruga. How do you say that? Like the knitted kippah. Many of them are settlers. But they also, the settlers are mostly national religious, Zionist national religious, but also within Israel you also have a lot of national religious. So they don't live just in the settlements, but they comprise, probably 90% of the settlements are comprised of national religious. They are now, these days, they're 15%, and the projection for 2030 is 18%. And as I told you, secular Jewish are 40%. They will go down to 35%. There are some numbers missing here because, some of the people are hard to, it's hard to, some people are not willing to identify themselves, or they are in, some sorts of other groups. So this is not 100%. But what you can see right now is that when you thought of Israel as having one big majority of Jewish, secular, Zionist, liberal, it's changing, and one group, and then, the little minorities, it is changing, and as it said here, PAS, large secular Zionist majority with 3 groups of religious Arabs and Haredim. And what Rivlin has said, and what Rivlin has portrayed in his speech, he said, we're moving forward towards a vision of 4 tribes. So those 4 tribes are not going to be equal in the numbers, but definitely the liberal Zionists are going to be less in power, right? Because you're going to have a growing Arab minority, which you cannot call them the minority anymore. You will not be able to call Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, a small minority. They're not going to be, they're 12% now. They're growing. And the secular are less. And the outcome is that, the outcome here, it says here, different education system, and I will touch a little bit about those differences, because right now when you talk about Israel's Arabs, Israel's Haredim, Israel religious Zionists, and Israel secular, you must understand we have 4 different education systems for the kids, and all of those systems are managed by different people, and the curriculum is different, and even if we go deeper than that, the meaning of what it is to be a Jewish and democratic state, the meaning of the democratic values they teach us, those systems are different. And there isn't anyone who has a coherence for these four different groups, because obviously if you're an yeshiva kid and you go to ultra-Orthodox education system, you probably will not, when in your high school, you probably will not be studying mathematics and English, and your Bible studies are your major. Whereas the secular kids, they study more of science and English and languages, but obviously their educational preparation in heritage, Judaism, Bible studies is lessened. And the same goes for the Arab kids, which obviously they don't study Jewish studies, and their education system is at Arabic. It's not in Hebrew. Hebrew is their second language, and not all of them know Hebrew. So it's a mandatory, but the level of their Hebrew skills is much, much lower. And in the rest of the education system, Arabic studies are not mandatory. So Israeli kids do not know, Jewish kids, they do not know Arabic. So those groups, and we're talking about, 20, 21, 24%, and the rest of the population, they don't speak the same language. And they don't think about the hierarchy of the norms of the democratic states in the same way and in the same vision. And let me just stress how it goes deeper than that. Media, if we're talking about media outlets, so all of those four groups are consuming very different media outlets. And I have a little story to tell you. I mean, ultra-Orthodox, by the way, they don't have TV sets at houses. Because back in the 60s, when TV entered the markets, 50s and 60s, their rabbis were pretty strong in saying, no, you will not bring this toeva, this obscene machine into the houses. So they don't have TV sets until these days. But what happened in the early 2000s and late 90s and early 2000s, when the internet became really, really strong, all of those young people in the ultra-Orthodox society, they all have these little computers, and they have maybe one or two of them, and they have computers in the house. And these days, they're very, very strong on their communication skills. They have huge websites. Their websites are very strong in traffic and in breaking news and everything. But there is a difference because, some of them speak in Yiddish, which is another language I didn't mention before. And the website, for example, like a Haredi ultra-Orthodox website, if it is a strict ultra-Orthodox, they will not show women faces. For example, I was interviewed in 2016 when I was covering here the elections. When I went back to Israel, one of those ultra-Orthodox paper wanted to interview me and ask me questions about Hillary Clinton. Now, both me and Hillary Clinton did not appear in the piece. They actually put a piece together. Me, it's not important. They actually put a whole double spread about the U.S. elections without printing her face, because they don't print women faces. Another, great example is that I have a really, really good friend of mine. His name is Eliezer, and he is an op-ed columnist from the Ultra-Orthodox Society. And he has this, NGO works really hard to bring forward ultra-Orthodox voices into the mainstream media. So he writes an op-ed for my paper, for Globe's business newspaper. And it was Rosh Hashanah. It was New Year's Eve this year. So I don't know if you recall, it was Sunday, the Eve, and then Monday and Tuesday were the holiday, the Chag. And on Tuesday morning, when everybody was still celebrating the Chag, the Rosh Hashanah, his op-ed went up online. At the end of the Tuesday, when the Chag is out, when the Rosh Hashanah is out, he writes to me on the WhatsApp, and he says, Tal, I am devastated. Apparently, my op-ed went online on your website on a Tuesday morning when it was Chag, when it was Rosh Hashanah. I'm like, okay, so, what's your point? And he goes, oh my God, you guys are secular. You will never understand my frustration. I'm like, frustration with what? And he says, I may have caused a Jewish person to go out from his house to the news desk and put my op-ed online during the Chag, during the Rosh Hashanah. And I'm like, Eliezer, we are a news website. We work 24 hours 7. What do you think I'm doing on Friday evening if there's a breaking news in politics or in, what do you think? I mean, I was, to tell you the truth, I was, bursting out laughing. Really, I had zero understanding. I mean, obviously not in his face, but I was surprised by the question. What did you think? The word, and I told him, Eliezer, website. I mean, our website's been going on before you were born. What's the big deal? Oh, anyways, he called up the op-ed editor to complain and said for him it's like a felony, causing a fellow Jewish to go to work on a Tuesday or when it's a Chag, when it's a Rosh Hashanah. So the op-ed editor actually is coming from the Jewish Zionist nationalist group, was smarter than me. And he told him, Eliezer, you don't have to worry. There is an automatic website. We put the op-ed, on Sunday morning before the Rosh Hashanah entered, and it went online by itself on Tuesday morning. Nobody had to come to work for you. And this guy was so relieved. And I thought it was funny, just to show you the different way, So the Arab population in Israel, they have their own radio station in Arabic. They're on TV stations in Arabic. They don't actually watch or read much of the Jewish, general press. They do read it, but not in, it's not common. They're not, for example, my paper, we are, trying to enlarge our subscribers. We are in a very low numbers within the Arab society. It's just a business newspaper. It's not a political paper. So we're not, the paper is not pro-settlers or pro-Netanyahu, or it's not, too lefty or so. It's not, it's a business newspaper. You would think like elite people, like business people in the Arab society would need to read it but we don't have, we're now trying really hard to get a push into the Arab society for more subscribers, but it's really, really tough. So obviously I'll go into that in a minute, but it's not just the media. And Zionist nationalists have their own media outlets. And of course everybody read, not everybody, but I think the ultra-Orthodox and the Zionists, they do read our business newspaper. But you have, other papers that are more widely read. But it goes beyond just, I told you about the education system and about the media. And then it goes into the draft, for example. The draft, Israel has a mandatory draft. Everybody knows that, right? So when I'm saying everybody, I mean two tribes, the secular tribe and the Zionist religious nationalist tribe. What about the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs? They don't have mandatory draft. So it's not mandatory anymore, right? You have two tribes out of the 4 tribes who are, coerced, or how would I say it, are enforced by the Israeli government to go into the military, including my kids, for example, including myself when I was younger. But you cannot call it mandatory draft anymore when you have, a growing part of the population who doesn't take part in these major missions of Israeli young people, and we are not in a phase when we can just let go of the military. We're going to need it. We're not, we're a nation under attack. So what's going to happen next in 2050, if the Haredi group will be, much bigger and the Arab group will be much bigger? Who's going to take the toll of taking care, of the borders? And it goes into the workforce, or the poverty line. So if you look at Israel poverty lines, 2 bottom poverty lines encompasses mostly of Arab and ultra-Orthodox. So the secular tribe is still, much better off, and the Zionist religious nationalist tribe is really better. It's in a good position, the settlers, and so they are, economically, they're better off. whereas the ultra-Orthodox and the Arab society, they really encompass the lower part of the poverty lines, which doesn't go to say that they are not educated, because if you look at education and achievements for universities, actually the ultra-Orthodox do not do universities mostly. They are against studying together, women and men, so they cannot go to a regular public-funded university. The Israeli Arabs, on the other hand, highly educated. So if you have ranking of Israel's high schools, for example, the first on the list is a Druze high school up in the north. For years now, it's been succeeding to get better results than any other high school in the country. If you look at medical profession, it's filled with Arab society. So if you go into Israel's hospital these days, I don't wish anyone of you to have the experience, but we do have a better health system than yours. We do. I lived here in the United States. I've experienced what you're experiencing. It's not easy. When you go back to Israel, many things are, challenging when you go back to Israel after so many years in the United States. The way of living, the infrastructure, but many things are challenging. But one thing that is really good moving back to Israel is becoming an Israeli, again, a consumer of the health system. We do have lots of problems, but anyways, if you step into a hospital, the pharmaceutical, the nurses, the doctors, the technicians, probably you will encounter at least half people that are Arabs. Any pharmacy in Israel is probably 70 to 80% Arabs that are in this occupation. If you look at Israel's member of the Knesset, the parliament, 120, we have, out of the 120, we have 2 doctors. One is OBGYN and another one is a dentist. 2 of them are Arabs. So it's quite a trend with the Arab society, highly educated, engaged in Israel's workforce, but not enough. Arab women are not fully engaged. Haredic males are not engaged. Their occupation participation is much lower than the rest of the society. So, when you look at about those 4 tribes, you see a lot of differences. And Rivlin actually, and I'll give you a quote. Where is the quote? It's somewhere here. Yeah, there's a good quote for him in the speech. He said, I have this paper mixed because of my previous lecture, and I didn't, put them back in order. I'll skip the quote. Okay. It's here. By the way, you can Google his speech. It's in English. You just Google the 4 Tribes Vision, President Rivlin, 2015 or so, and you will see quite, I think, mind-changing, makes you think. What he said, one of his sentences during this speech, he said, for many of us, this demographic change is perceived as a threat to the secular liberal character of the State of Israel, on one hand, and on the other hand, a danger to the Zionist enterprise. This is because what I told you about the draft and about the way, how can you proceed like that with the education systems being wholly separated. With that, you may try to think, maybe try to understand why we have a problem getting Israel's government working. Because, as I told you at the beginning, this is, by the way, Benny Gantz. I don't know if you have heard the name. But this is, I'm sure you all know, this is Netanyahu, the prime minister, right? So Netanyahu has been in power for 11 years in a row. Next month is the 11th, we're closing on the 11th year. Before that, in the 90s, he was a prime minister for 3 years. So altogether, it's 14 years, but 11 years in a row. We don't have term limitation. We don't have a constitution. So the only way to replace him is at the polls. And what is happening, and this is the contender, Benny Gantz, is a former chief IDF. They are shaking hands here at Rivlin's residence back in May, after the April election, the president, as I told you, has the ceremonial job of granting someone the opportunity to put together a government. Back in April, he gave the opportunity to Netanyahu, and Netanyahu had no choice but to invite Gantz for a negotiation because, by the way, they're both from the secular tribe, right? They're heading the two biggest parties. Netanyahu has the Likud, and Gantz has blue and white. It's sort of this is the Israeli new left. Labor, historically, the big Labor, which founded the country, which was the party of Ben Gurion and the party of all Israel initial leaders, is now down to a very small number of 6 seats in the Knesset, in the parliament. Meretz is the other small green liberal, very lefty group, is down to 5. So 11 together for Israel, what used to be Israel big left, big labor socialist groups. Labor still define itself as socialist. Those two parties define themselves as socialist, whereas Benny Gantz with his blue and white party, which is now sort of a centrist, more centrist left, doesn't define themselves as socialist, but they are, major Israeli center bloc. And what happened is that they were trying to form a government. I mean, Netanyahu was trying to form a government, but nothing worked because Netanyahu is under indictment. I'm sure you all know that. Gantz said, let me go first, because those two parties are, big two parties together. Gantz said, I'll go for you. You have to share the government as a prime minister, 2 years and 2 years. This is very different from the American system, as I told you. We call it a rotation agreement. This is the coalition agreement, but it's also called a rotation agreement, which means it's an Israeli original series with Israeli original invention. No other country does that, but we had that in the past. So what Gantz said to him, let me be first because I brought in more votes, and he did. And you can go second so I'll be prime minister for the first 2 years. You'll be prime minister for the next 2 years. During those first 2 years, go have your day in court, handle your legal problems, and I'll be the prime minister. But Netanyahu said, no, I'm unwilling to do it. And instead of being flexible, he said, let's have another election. Just try it out again. And they did. They did it in September, this recent September, and the outcome was much worse for Netanyahu. So instead of bringing in, Israel has the parliament has 120 people, so a majority would be 61. In order to form a government, you need to have at least 61. Netanyahu back in April had 60, which means he was one short of a majority. This is the reason he needed Benny Gantz with him. In April, he was down to 55. So we were in September, 55 for Netanyahu, unable to form a government, 65 for Gantz, but unable to form a government also. Why is that? Anyone knows? Because the 65, the other side, if you need me to say the numbers again, I'll repeat it. It's a little bit, So with the 65 of Benny Gantz, 13 out of them were the Arabs, a tribe, right? And this tribe doesn't want to sit in the tribe with the secular and with the Zionist religious and with the ultra-Orthodox. They don't want to work together. So the 65 really, it's sort of a majority, but with no powers. And the other side, which is 55, did not have enough numbers to get itself, to build a coalition. So what do? They had third election are taking place in March 2nd, 2 weeks from the day I'm leaving the United States. So back in November, and I'm a political reporter, back in November when I was planning this trip and I was already set to be here, and we didn't know if we're going to have a third election. My editor said, what? I told my editor, what are we going to do? I mean, I'm the political reporter. There's another fellow colleague who is helping me. But she said, do not cancel your trip. You've been waiting for the Caucasus for 4 years. This is your thing. You like it. It's enriching for me to be here, to get out of and just don't cancel your trip. We'll be fine. It's a third election, but we didn't know at this time if the election are going to take place. And of course, in a week or two, the Knesset the parliament was dissolved. The date was set, and she said, "Fine, go. Don't worry, we're fine." So right now I have my colleague busting his ass while I'm here having fun. And yeah, there is really working hard. So yeah, when I wrote this presentation, I only had 2 cycles, but now you see 2 elections and the third one in 2020. And I have to tell you, we might have a 4th one, because what's going to happen, what's going to be different, I think the Israeli people are still, holding to Netanyahu very strong, and they are unwilling to let him go with the criminal charges and everything. This is unlike the impeachment trial here. I know tomorrow is the end of the impeachment trial. It's not the same in Israel. Israel's prime minister is going into court. This is going to happen. It's going to start next month or so. The court it's a professional judges. It's a panel of 3 people who have been judges for their entire life. And there's no way back. So he's not going to get immune, or he's not going to get released. He's not going to get off the hook. Even Rivlin, who is the president, will not pardon him. As I told you, he has pardoning powers, but it doesn't use his discretion himself to pardon something. I mean, I don't think he will. He can do it, but not before of the trial. It will not happen. So it's a constitutional crisis, and are we witnessing the final months of Netanyahu's rule? I can't tell you. I really, it's too complicated to see if he's. This is him at the Machane Yehuda market in Jerusalem. It's one of those big, lively markets with the Likud flags. He loves to do this, walking around in areas and places and talking to people. And this is his opponent, Benny Gantz. As I told you, he was chief IDF. His entire party is comprised of former military people, a very militarized party. It's kind of weird in Israel. The military is moderate, where the political, ranks are more right-wing, more, the nationalist, right-wing driven, whereas the military establishment is actually more moderate, and it's more, usually they come with the experience from the ground with the Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, so they know the people of the other side much better than the politicians, and they want the military not to be so aggressive. It's kind of opposing to their job. We said that I'll mention Trump and Netanyahu. This is Netanyahu's slogan. It's in Hebrew. Do you read it? Can you read it? I'll tell you. It says Netanyahu, different league. So this poster, this is the Likud slogan, the Likud logo down here. So this poster actually in life, Trump is much higher. Not much higher, but, they put it on the poster together. When they stand next to each other, they are not sharing the same height. But they're very happy, as you can see, to see each other. They're good friends. They've been good friends before Trump was president. Trump actually made a campaign video for Netanyahu in 2013 election, which is kind of funny to look at it today, because in 2013 he wasn't even working on his presidency yet. Maybe he thought about it, but he made a campaign video like those videos that this message was by, like you have here, the spots that they watch on TV. The same thing. He's sitting in front of the TV as if he's in The Apprentice, and he says, "Mr. Netanyahu and myself, we're good friends." It's like a TV thing. Those posters were printed in huge amounts and huge scale, and were put up on buildings like high rises. So can you imagine driving through Israel and seeing this on a high rise through the biggest highways? for all of the rounds, actually, the first round and the second round. And what it meant to say that Netanyahu is different league of a leader. He has, really in Israel, if a prime minister has good connection with the White House, that's an asset, right? I think it's the same in Belgium, in Spain, and in Egypt, and everywhere around the world. So I know some of you are upset with your president, but if you go to Spain, or if you go to Africa, or if you go to Eastern Europe, you will find that world leaders, they really want to be in a good connection with the U.S. president. And obviously, the same goes for Israel. And Israel is on the top of the list because the Israeli people are kind of adoring President Trump. So it played well for Netanyahu, but actually it did not play very well because obviously the numbers, as I told you, went down from, we call it term A, like in students, when you have term A, term B, when the students get a second chance for their exams, right? How do you call it in English? Term...
First semester, second semester.
No, but in the first, sometimes in the... sorry? Makeup exam, exactly. So we actually in Hebrew we call it a makeup election. Yeah, because Netanyahu defined the second election as an opportunity for him to gain more seats. So he said there was something I did wrong on the first term, so I get to do the makeup. Obviously, the results, the grade was F. And we'll see what happened in the third term. So in order to have makeup of the makeup exam, what he's doing right now is actually doing the different league campaign, which means he's traveling to the White House. That was last week. From the White House, instead of flying back to Israel, he took the plane with the entire entourage and reporters, media, and everybody and said, I'm flying to Putin. And he flew to Russia to meet Putin. But he did not have to meet Putin because Putin was just in Jerusalem a week ago. But so why did he fly to see Putin a week after he met him in Jerusalem? The reason for that was he told the Israeli media, I am flying from the White House to brief Putin about Trump's peace plan. So, but Putin already said that he is against this peace plan, A, and B, you can call him, you can WhatsApp him. You don't have to take, entire 500 people with you to this. So the real reason was something else. He had this Israeli person who was held in jail in Russia for, it's a different story, but the Russians released her after 9 months. And Netanyahu decided that he will do, they have this kind of, today the campaigns are a lot about, it's like reality show, right? Every chapter you have to bring something really exciting for the people to watch. So you go with the plane to Russia and you put on the prisoner, a woman, a young woman, an Israeli woman with her mom, and you bring them on your airplane to Israel's Ben Gurion airport, and the entire cameras are clicking. This is a great chapter of the reality show. And so yesterday he flew to Uganda. And I will not be surprised if he will be in Japan next week or in India. You got to give it to him that all of those world leaders are playing along pretty good. So he wants to meet Putin. I mean, Israeli people are looking at it, and we never had a situation like that where our prime minister is just, he wants to be with Putin. He's with Putin the following day. He wants to be at Trump's. He's there. This is rare. I don't think there is any world leader who can pull that, really. And having said that, when you look at the polling, the polling for the third term, the makeup exam, no change. So blue and white still leading. So this guy, nobody knew him a year ago. I mean, we knew him because he was chief IDF, but we didn't know him well. This guy, his party is bigger. With everything, I have the numbers here if you want to look into them. In the second term, he actually brought 1 seat higher than the Likud. By the way, the name is Benny Gantz. He was a military attaché in D.C. when I was D.C. correspondent back then. And it's one thing that is very different from knowing those two personas on a personal basis. I can really say that because I do know Netanyahu very well, traveling with him. And Benny Gantz, actually, he was the military attaché in D.C. when I was D.C. correspondent, and I have to tell you, the personalities, the person, the character is, 180 degrees different. So he is this kind of a very mellow, relaxed, gentleman-like person. He speaks very softly. He has a very calm manner. He never reacts harshly. It also comes with a disadvantage because he may be slow at a time. How do you say it? Phlegmatic. Was that a word in English? He doesn't react on a fast pace. And at my paper, we have this fact-checking section where we take politicians' statements and we fact-check them. And you all know what's going in the Trump era when you try to fact-check those politicians. So the same goes with the ministers and Netanyahu. It's easier to fact-check them because they have authoritative powers and they are more prominent on the media. So it's much easier to fact-check Netanyahu because he has all of those statements. But on the negative side, when you try to fact-check Benny Gantz, you cannot come up with a fact-checking article. Why is that? Because all of his statements are always loafy and general. It doesn't really say concrete stuff. So he doesn't commit to anything. So when you try to fact-check him and look for mistakes, he doesn't make them because he doesn't go outside of his, safe zone to make controversial statements. So I don't know if it's good or bad. I thought it was when we came out at Globes and we say, people were asking, why aren't you fact-checking Benny Gantz? We had to admit that none of his statements can be factual checked because he doesn't say much factual things. So I'm saying it in a negative way. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. I have lots of more stories to tell you, but I don't know if we should go into questions and answers a bit. This is the Israeli parliament. I sit up here at the galley, and this is the members of the Knesset. And right here, you see this. I think it's the photo that I've taken, actually. You see the president, Ruby Rivlin. Can you see him? That's him right here. Sitting next to he used to be the speaker of the Knesset before becoming a president, so this position is used to it. It seems to me like this is maybe a swearing in. No, it's not a swearing in, because I see a lot of people in the crowds, so it probably was a ceremony or so. But my spot is right up here. Those are my colleagues that I know personally, and maybe I can leave that up here, but maybe we'll take questions because Jewish community, we can talk about it. Oh, this is me in the White House. So President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu are seated just right here on that side, but someone from the other side of the couch took this. So this is the Israeli press group trying to to record and ask questions President Trump, and she is looking at us with such a dismay. She's like, oh, just people. So I thought that was like a fun photo. Okay. All right, let's leave it. Let's leave that photo. So I will be happy to take some questions.